Hello everyone, DMGeezerjim here. More monsters. Having fun doing this. Going to keep rolling while I'm feeling good about it. Yes. Continuing along in my monster short series. We're just talking about. I'm just going to take some time to talk about monsters, man. The fifth edition standard stuff. 5e published monsters throughout the books, obviously. But yeah, the rule as written wherever possible, making sure that this information I'm looking at is the same information that's available to you. I'm trying to keep it as short as I can manage for my long-winded old self. But focusing on three major points for each of the monsters that we're going to look at, how to help you stage them in some situations, their locations, their realms or ranges, and other locations, just tactical stuff. So let's jump on in, man. This time I'm gonna look at the. I guess we're on a roll with aberrations. So we're gonna take a look at the little bitty wonderful Intellect Devourer, something that's popped up in popularity, especially since Baldur's Gate 3 and the Phandalin Deep Below, the focus on mind flayers and aberrations. These guys are popping up a little bit more. So let's look at three things to know, three things to keep in mind when it comes to running mind flayers or intellect devourers. And the first thing is that yes, they are going to be dependent on mind flayers being present. Intellect devourers are not single solitary roaming creatures. The first thing to keep in mind with an intellect devourer, they're not solitary hunters. There is the social aspect. Where you're using them should really be influenced by this scenario overall. Typically, you don't want to drop an intellect devourer in as a random monster or something like that. Intellect devourers and by proxy their masters mind flayers tend to be story-driven creatures and story-driven encounters. Excuse me. So your intellect devourer number one is it's going to be scenario and socially driven. They're not wandering out in the woods randomly doing stuff. If they're not within a mind flayer lair, they're in a nearby social area trying to find a victim. First thing to remember, don't want to spend too much time on it. I think it kind of makes sense. Intellect devourers are the watchdogs, the eyes, the ears, the workers for mind flayers. They're not going to be too far away from mind flayers in any way, shape, or form. Typically, no more than a mile, maybe 2 miles away, is where you start losing that elder brain mind flayer intellect devourer network starts breaking down. First thing to remember, they're not solo single solitary creatures. Using them is going to be dependent on a social situation, a specific game mechanic situation. Don't think of although they're creepy looking, they're fun to talk about. Two or three of them running around is going to indicate that there are mind flayers nearby. So, keep that in mind as their presentation. Number two is obviously, we're going to land on their abilities here. Okay. The number two thing with the ability is also going to lead us into number three, the overall adventure use. Okay. Number two is their detect sentience. So as a dungeon master, if you have mind flayers in play, by definition, they're going to know the location of your party out to 300 feet away. And if you're planning on using them in combat, if you're planning on actually jumping into a fight with them, by and large, they're going to have the advantage moving in regarding knowing where the party is, how to set up, what the party's doing at any given point in time, because they sense the presence and location of any creature within 300 feet if that creature has an intelligence of 3 or higher. Okay? The second thing is, unless you have a mind blank, unless your players have amulet against detection location, mind blank spell, something like that would likely would stop the detect sentience. They're stealthy creatures. They have a +4 on their stealth rolls, +2 on base perception. They have blind sight past 60 feet. Invisibility doesn't even matter. Beyond this radius, they're absolutely blind, so very high detection. Okay, moving around invisibly, moving stealth around an intellect devourer is going to be negated by their ability to detect sentience and a pretty good perception and blind sight. Okay, the second thing to keep in mind is their combat abilities. They're not very tough unless your party gets unlucky on saving throws, or unless you're very, very cognizant on who you're targeting. Okay, you're the dungeon master. You're allowed to meta here. Okay, that's, let's step out for a second, and you know, you're going to be picking on your dumbest player, your lowest level, your lowest intelligence when you use a mind flayer. Their second ability, Devour Intellect. The Intellect Devourer targets one creature can see within 10 feet of it that has a brain. The target must succeed on a DC 12 savings throw against this magic or take 2d10 psychic damage. Also, if they fail, they roll 3d6. If the total equals or exceeds their intelligence, the score is reduced to 0 and your target's stunned until they regain intelligence. Okay? Zero, so they're literally, you have a possible chance of a one-shot incapacitation of your lower intelligence character. That could be your warlock, that could be your barbarian, your fighter. There's a few people that use intelligence as a dump stat. Maybe not necessarily dropping a 5 or a 6 in there. Some people think it's fun to do that. That's who you're supposed to target. So be aware and make sure that, this is an intelligence of 12 creature. They've got enough sentience to them to plan intelligently with their abilities. When they use their Devourer intellect, they're not going after a magic user. They're not going after the wizard. They're not going after the smartest person in the group. They're going after the dummy because it's going to be the easiest thing for part 2 to happen. Once someone is stunned, they initiate an intelligence contest with an incapacitated humanoid that isn't protected by protection from evil and good, which you probably would have to call aberration. If it wins the contest, the Intelligent Devourer magically consumes the target's brain, teleports into the target's skull, and takes control of the target's body. Okay, while inside, the creature has total cover against attacks and basically is operating the person as a robot. They know that they retain the intelligence, wisdom, charisma score of the Intellect Devourer, their own, so they're not completely dumb anymore. Basically, they have taken the place of the no longer present brain's brain. Okay. Otherwise, adopts the target's statistics. It knows everything the creature knew, including spells and languages. So you've taken control of a player character with this ability. You've grabbed your barb, you've hit them with Devour Intellect, and then you hit them with Body Thief the next turn. Now, if the body dies, the Devourer must leave it. If someone casts Protection from Evil or Good on the body, on the possessed body, it drives the Intellect Devourer out. Or if it regains any intelligence by means of a wish. Okay, so this is a small, low CR creature that, if used properly, can absolutely incapacitate your party. It can really jack up the composition of a party. You can effectively eliminate one character on the drop of a hat with 2 bad rolls. So that's the third thing to keep in mind when we get around to the Intellect Devourer. Number 1, it's a social creature. It's going to be used within certain situations. It's going to have, the interactions with the Mind Flayers and the nearby Mind Flayer colony or hive or whatever you're using. Intellect Devourers don't exist outside of pertaining to that. Number 2, their abilities are not very potent unless you are intelligent about using them. The Intellect Devourer is dependent on you, the Dungeon Master, me, using the Body Thief and the Devourer Intellect in concert on the proper target. Okay? Number 3 is how we're actually wrapping all of this up and making it matter is you don't necessarily you're not bound to eliminate your party with this. As a DM, statistically, if you have 3 Intellect Devourers target that barbarian, you're going to have that barbarian under your control. In the cacophony of a fight, 3 or 4 Intellect Devourers going, 1 or 2 people stunned, getting control of one of them, passing your player that note, letting them know, hey, you're under control. So prepare something off to the side to where you're not completely destroying your party. You're giving them the opportunity to regain control of that character. But you now use that incapacitated / body thief player as a driver to move your party into the story. So an Intellect Devourer, in my opinion, is not necessarily something that you want to employ just willy-nilly to just jack with your party. But it's definitely something you can use to railroad your party without them necessarily feeling railroaded. This encounter happens at a certain time in a certain place. Statistically, someone's going to lose that. If you target a party that's not prepared and not effective, or if you just hit with 3 or 4 of them while a Mind Flayer is in presence of them, you're going to snatch someone, and that someone can be led back to the lair, and your party's going to go rescue them. So, and it doesn't have to be this long drawn out quest, because remember, my Intellect Devourer, our little ugly brain guy here, is not going to be far from the lair. It's not going to be operating 50 miles away from a mind flayer hive. So the plus side is using rule number 1, using the first thing, making sure that you're aware of the social aspect of the Intellect Devourer's presence, along with number 2, proper targeting of its abilities leads you to number 3, using an Intellect Devourer to move your party forward into a story involving mind flayers. It doesn't have to be an entire colony. It could be a lich that's hanging out with a mind flayer. Mind flayer uses the Intellect Devourers, whatever. But it's, rather than thinking of it an Intellect Devourer as a combat-centric random encounter, understanding its abilities in line with the social situation allows you, for number 3, to use it for a story-driving creature. Something that's going to give you control at any point in time to steer the party where they need to go for something to happen. So, that's really it. There's a lot more that I would talk about Intellect Devourers in line with Mind Flayers. If you guys were wanting to sit around for an hour-long video, leave some comments. Let me know if you want to know some more. But I just think that's 3 things that anyone could pick up, put some Mind Flayers in use, Intellect Devourers in use alongside a Mind Flayer scenario to really kind of get your party in line in a direction that you need to go, provide some ooh-ah-wow factor without completely having a player sit out a game, lose control of their character, and or die. So, that's it. Hopefully you guys have enjoyed this quickie. Intellect Devourers, they're creepy, they're ooky, they're fun. Thank God they don't have invisibility. If they still had invisibility like they did in 1E, that's the end of the world as we know it. But thankfully 5Es don't. So the plus side is, no matter what, your party's always going to see them coming. For what that's worth. Or that might not be good if someone sees a brain skittering at the floor across. Oh, hell no, I'm out. But yeah, have some fun with it. Anyway, Jim here, signing out. Thanks so much for joining me on this short. We're going to knock a couple more out and kind of keep this series going. I love talking monsters, love talking tactics. So this is a nice way to do a little bit both without, taking an hour of y'all's time. Appreciate you. Likes, follows, subscribe, shares, all that kind of stuff is appreciated. Love to hear from you in the comments. Be safe.